so valuable that we are going to do it in a video format. Eve Prophet, I'm a program specialist with the Office for Educator Licensure and Effectiveness at the Kentucky Department of Education, and I work primarily with the principal preparation institutions. Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin Stull. I'm the Superintendent of Schools in Garrett County, and I appreciate the opportunity of joining with Eve and Jenny to talk about this exciting work around PSEL.
And my name is Jenny Ray, and I am the lead for the Principal Partnership Project, or P3, here at the Kentucky Department of Education. And I will begin by sharing my screen and showing you how to access the resources that we're going to be using today. So you may access the resources for today from the Principal Partnership Project Google site. You can use the bit.ly on the screen or scan the QR code to go to the site. Once you're there, you will click on Kentucky PSEL Professional Learning Series. So let's go ahead and go to the site now. So once you're here, you can scroll down to see and preview the available tools. First of all, you will see the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool. It's populating here. To the right of that, there's a 1.5-minute video for a quick navigation tutorial for using the tool. Below the tool, you will see the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, the National PSEL Standards. And then, if you scroll on down, you'll see the Professional Learning Series modules. And there are 6 modules, and we'll be just giving you an overview of each one of those modules today. All right, so let me go back. So I'll turn it over to Eve to talk about the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, the PSEL, and its development.
This process of the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders started with the Educational Professional Standards Board. They did adopt these standards in February of 2019, and as of July 1st, 2019, all of the preparation programs, all of the educator preparation programs had to align with the professional standards the professional standards. Then the second thing that occurred is the Kentucky Board of Education opened up the framework for personnel evaluation in Regulation 704 KAR 3370, and it's gone through the regulatory process, and as of June 2020, the standards have been adopted and they're ready for implementation. And the key thing to know from all of this is that as of this fall in 2021 school year, all principals and assistant principals will be evaluated with the PSEL standards. We're going to move on now and to talk about, as Jenny mentioned earlier, we have done 6 modules to support the schools as they start to do the implementation of PSEL standards. And what we want to do is all of these are virtual learning modules, and modules 1 through 3 are pretty, can be done in a self-pacing kind of fashion without a lot of interaction. However, modules 4, 5, and 6 are very interactive and a bit longer. The first 3 modules are less than 15 minutes each. So we want to encourage you to use these modules, and as you saw on the page that Jenny illustrated, you not only have the video of the module, but you also have the script and the PowerPoint and additional resources. So just know that these are a support link for you, as well as sharing with you the professional standards if you haven't done a lot of inquiry in those. And module 1 is built around the requirements, introducing the whole issue of the requirements. And you'll notice that in the KAR, this change substitutes the standards, the professional standards, for all principals and assistant principal professional standards. That has been replaced to say PSEL. So effective July 1 2020, these are the standards to be used for the evaluation of principals and assistant principals. So in Module 1, that's what we are addressing. And in the next slide, we share with you the process of how these standards were developed. They are national standards. They were built by all kinds of associations. You can see a list of the many, many associations that were involved in this. Additionally, you will notice that the standards are introductory standards, and they do it took them more than 2 years for these to come into fruition, as well as to be adopted at the national level. There were more than 1,000 practicing educators involved. They were vetted and they were actually piloted. So these national standards went through a pretty research-based process in order to be designed and vetted and to be adopted. As we move on, we are going to be talking about the structure of the standards. You will notice that there are 10 of these PECL standards. The old principal standards, there were only 6. So on page 27, you'll get a one-page view of the 10 standards. And we're going to explain a little bit more about how these standards are organized as we move forward. On page 9, we look at Standard 1. And this is the format of the book that we're going to share with you. You first will notice the title. In Standard 1, the title is Mission, Vision, and Core Values. In the next piece of that, that's the broad title of what the standard's about. Then you will get a statement that gives you what the standard is expected. That's the specific area of leadership practice that does describe the intent and responsibility of effective leaders. In this one, it says effective educational leaders develop, advocate, and enact a shared mission, vision, and core values of high quality education and academic success and well-being of each student. Below that, you will notice that there are elements labeled with letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And these elements are subcategories of that leadership practice that was in the statement above. Each of these breaks it out and is a little more definitive in what they describe in terms of what the statement means in terms of leadership practice. As we move into our next slide, we're going to share with you the fact that this is the change in the regulation. And when we had a change in regulation, that means that each district in Kentucky needed to implement the district certified evaluation plans, and they needed to review and change them. And that's what each district has been busy doing. This is a captured screen that many of the certified evaluation plans have, and you will notice the principal line is in orange and circled here. Those are the old standards. And something you will notice in the new CEPs is that those have been replaced with the professional standards for educational leadership. And these are the 10 standards. And you will notice that those 10 standards are identified by each of the 4 areas of evaluation: planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. And you will notice that if we just look at the first one, planning, standards 1, 9, and 10 of the new standards are mostly focused on planning. 2, 3, and 7 on environment, 4, 5, and 6 on instruction, and 2 and 8 on professionalism. But this is just kind of an overview to kind of show you how, when you're looking at the areas that you will be evaluated in, how that you won't have to have all 10 standards in each area, but you will be looking at specific areas. As we go on, we're going to share with you a way that we have taken the national PECL, and in Kentucky, we have put together a document. You noticed the virtual tool earlier that was shared with you on the page, and we have named it Kentucky's PECL, or Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, Guidance for Growth and Evaluation. And we simply have made it a tool for support. This was a 2-year process, and it started back in 2018 with our universities doing the adoption of the professional standards. And it has been funded, their process was funded through a Wallace grant, bringing those practitioners together as well as other stakeholders to look at the standards and go through the adoption process. We had more than 50 practicing educational leaders and organizations involved, and you will see on the next slide how widespread we had people involved. We really involved lots of stakeholders across the state. You will notice that all of the universities that have the preparation programs were involved. You will also see the regional co-ops were involved. You will also see many principals or other kinds of stakeholders at different school districts were involved across the state. Plus, we had people from KASA, the Pritchard Committee, the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and the other ABC groups involved in this whole decision to look at the professional standards and determine if that's what we wanted in the state of Kentucky. As we go ahead and talk about the vision, this is the actual picture of what the tool looks like. We call it a virtual tool, support tool. You'll notice that we replicated the standard again. And in the standard, it's exactly like what it had in standard 1. We also put on the tool, the statement again. And then the big thing that you will notice is we also have the elements listed down the side. Now, the elements that were in the national standards, you will notice are exactly replicated at the accomplished level on ours. And we'll talk more about that in a moment, but this is the picture of how we incorporated everything into our virtual tool. And you will notice that it also is a flexible tool to where you can also look at each standard individually, and you can also make notes at the side as you use this tool. And we're going to go ahead, we'll explain a little bit more about this. Our modules go into this very deeply so that you can take it slowly and have a look at it. But the critical attributes that we put into each of the standards are more of a big idea kind of thing, and we included those to give guidance as school districts are attempting to implement the professional standards. We're going to describe these a bit later. So this was just what might the standards look like in practice, or the critical attributes. And as we move on into the next part, we not only did critical attributes, but we also gave possible examples. Now, our stakeholders were wonderful in coming up with the examples of each of the 4 levels. But it's important for you to be aware that these are only possible examples. They are not the perfect examples. They're not a checklist. They're not something to go through and check, we did this, we did this. They're not exhaustive. We know that there are many, many more examples that could be added in here. These are just some that were readily thought of as we looked at the critical attributes. And the other thing that's so important to understand is that these are relative from context to context. We do realize that at the elementary level, something would look different than it would at the secondary level, from one district to another district, from one school to another school. So we encourage all of our participants in the state to make note of additional examples that they think of as they move forward into working with this. So we're go into that a little bit more. We also mentioned earlier that we had lots of stakeholders involved. Some of the key stakeholders who gave us assistance on this are superintendents who were involved in this whole design process, who really reviewed this document and gave us suggestions that contributed greatly to our module development. And we want to thank these superintendents as they worked with us, because we do know that the superintendents work with many of the stakeholders that are going to be involved in using this document. As we go ahead, we're going to think now about what might be the performance level. So we're going to go into examples of what you might find in Module 2. And Module 2 only focuses on the performance levels, the first one being the ineffective level. The descriptions for what is considered ineffective would be that the person has not demonstrated the standard, has not met it, and demonstrated that acceptable level of performance. Their practice and outcomes are not acceptable, and they would require some additional monitoring and some attention. And the language is so important in this document. A language look-fors for the ineffective would be that the actions that the principal or assistant principal did negatively impacted either staff or students. They were unable to perform the task. They restricted something. They were unaware. So paying attention to that language is very important as you look at the ineffective level. The next level, developing, talks about the fact that you see emerging skills, the fact that the leader is demonstrating knowledge and is aware of the practices, but has not at this point consistently or effectively executed the practices. So developing is a good level to be in. It says that, yes, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I've got to practice this as a little bit more. I don't, you know, one time is not enough sometimes to actually demonstrate some of the skills. The standards language that we talked about earlier, we do an analysis in 4, and it digs in deeper because that language is very deep. So developing is a good level to show that, gosh, I know we're supposed to be doing all these things, and here are some pieces that are coming forth. And there's limited evidence of the impact. I think that's the key. A lot of times we do things, but we don't have the evidence of impact. And language look-fors that can be considered here is attempts to develop something. You know, they know that to do it and they're attempting to do it. It's just not there yet. They do demonstrate basic knowledge and awareness, but things are inconsistent. So that's one of the big pieces that we would be looking for. The next level is accomplished, and this level is the key level. This is the represents the elements that are in the standards document. You see the standards document posted here. Accomplished, we have pulled out the actual language from the PECL standards document word for word, because this is where we plan to have people demonstrating their accomplishment. In this level, you'll notice that it gets bolded and that it is proficient and it's acceptable in terms of being making an impact. And the language look-fors in this one is that you ensure that most, you build, you sustain, you develop, and you consistently implement. So we want to emphasize again that accomplish is the element goal. This is where we really anticipate each of the elements being demonstrated over time. The last level is going to be the exemplary level. And the exemplary level has a significant lift to the language, moving from accomplished. And I think that's something, the language is so important here because it moves beyond the standard expectation and shows that there's a continuous demonstration of expertise and strategic capacity building. You will notice that the language that illustrates this is that they ensure all, not just some or most, but they ensure that all. They build and sustain. They don't just create something, they sustain it. They support the development of all. There are many people in a building, and so they're supporting the development of all. They're building the capacity of others, and that's a significant language lift because this is about capacity building of stakeholders, of staff, of others. And they consistently implement. It's not just mostly, and they're still inconsistent or they're trying at it, but they really do have consistent implementation. So pay attention to the language in each of these levels. This level is demonstrating that the PECL standards go way beyond the old principal standards. There's a lot of new language, and the reason for this is the principal's role has changed since 2010, and these new standards represent the new roles and responsibilities that are on principals today. The Commissioners, Principals Advisory Committee reviewed the old standards and the new standards, and they noted a significant number of additions in the professional standards. And they saw that these were indeed things that we need to be paying attention to. And some examples of these is the importance of equity and inclusiveness. Children are at the center of education. That's language that was not used in the old principal standards. Another one is that they align and focus systems. They promote student love of learning, and they have a healthy sense of self. Something else that was noted in these new standards is that effective use of technology. Technology was not included necessarily in the old principal standards, but the effective use of technology has a heavy emphasis in the professional standards. And more importantly, the reason the yellow is highlighted here is that there's a focus on promoting work-life balance of faculty and staff and maintaining one's own healthy work balance. And the reason this is so important, we actually in module to go into this and talk more about what does this mean and break it apart so that people have an understanding that there's an attention to the well-being of all. So as we move on to the next slide, we're going to be talking about the next module, which is module 3. Now, each of the modules takes a particular aspect of the professional standards and breaks it down. And this one is focusing on the critical attributes and possible standards. And as we mentioned earlier, the critical attributes are real important in that they are the vital qualities of and actions and features that describe each of the elements in the performance level. They have been, they're broad in design, but they're to provide general guidance for the evaluators, because those elements are pretty significant. They have a lot of meat to them and a lot of language. So it's rephrased in the critical elements to say, okay, so what does this mean when we are looking at the performance levels? If element A is there, what does it mean? So this is what the critical elements are doing. They're bringing forth those big ideas that are embedded in those elements. And the purpose, again, as we indicated, is just to provide general guidance for evaluators. Now, an example of this is on the screen now. We are showing you how Standard 1 has a lot of words to it if you look at all of the elements A through G. When you look at the attributes, we identified 4 critical attributes that lead to all of those elements. If you look at the first one, it says the school leader regularly collaborates with stakeholders representing diverse groups and validates their perspectives with action. This is aligned primarily with element B, C, F, and G. And when you read those elements, you will notice that those do contribute to what that critical attribute is talking about. You will also note that one element may appear in several critical attributes. If you look at element C, it is in every single one of the 4 critical attributes. So as we have defined those critical attributes, we have told you which elements they do align with, and all of the elements are included in the critical attributes, and sometimes more than once. One that I think is important is if you look at the attribute 3, it says the school leader ensures the school's vision and mission includes a laser-like focus on student academic achievement and social emotional development. That's a pretty deep one, and you will notice that elements A, B, C, E, and G align with that. And practice and knowing what this means is in module 3. And here's a deeper look at what the critical attribute for one of the elements is. First off, you'll note it's a critical attribute for accomplished because it's in bold. It says that this means that this is the goal. We want this to be where the school leader is. And so it's the performance level that we wish. And when you look at this, it says the school leader regularly collaborates with stakeholders representing diverse roles and validates their perspective with action. if you look at that, that regularly collaborates, diverse roles, validates, and action are key components of this attribute. And so this is what Module 3 does, is it takes several critical attributes and breaks them down so that you can actually look at the language, particularly the accomplished level. And you will notice that the virtual tool itself takes the critical attributes across all 4 levels. The pink level is always the ineffective, the yellow is the developing, the green is the accomplished, and the green is where we have aligned the elements. You will see B, C, F, and G listed here on this one. And the exemplary is in blue. So this is color-coded. You will see that listed. And in order to see if someone is accomplished, you will look for evidences. You will look for objective evidence to see what regular collaboration with stakeholders, diverse roles, validating perspectives, and action. You want to find out with evidence what that means. And on the next slide, we kind of share with you that evidence is things like, what might you hear the principal say that demonstrates action of this critical attribute? What might you see that brings a critical attribute to life? And the last one is, what artifacts might you examine to deduce the level of the application? And that the artifacts is a key thing here, because in the possible examples in Module 3, you will see some artifacts listed, but that does not mean those are the only artifacts that can be used. And this is one of the ways in which you can look at the alignment between critical attributes, the standards, the elements. You will notice that this one is aligned with B because it talks about data and success. C, which is the advocacy, the school culture, the child-centered, lots of things like that. F, which talks about shared understanding and commitment. And G, which is modeling and pursuing. When you're looking at those elements, a possible example might be one that we're showing you on the screen now. And each of we do this with several different elements in this module, Module 3. And one of the things that this example does is it says, based on a high referral rate and a recommendation from Juvenile Justice Court, the principal, in collaboration with a social worker, proposes to the Site-Based Decision-Making Council that an evaluation of the school's discipline policy with the focus on trauma-informed care led by the school guidance counselor be prioritized as work. Well, you're looking for a revised discipline policy here, records of corresponding, working with DJJ, the social worker, and then trend data. So you can see how all of this can come into perspective and the depth in which you could look at evidence as well as the elements and critical attributes. The next slide talks about how the possible examples might contribute to thinking about some of the evidence. And one of the things that we want to note is that the possible examples are just that. They are possible examples. They're not an all-inclusive list. They are concrete examples. They give you some wordings and things like that. But they're just, we want to use them as a springboard to brainstorm what might you be thinking about in terms of evidence for personalized examples. And each district and school are invited to personalize their example by adding to the actual document itself, which you can do on the virtual tool.
As Eve mentioned earlier.
And we're moving in.
Yes, as Eve mentioned earlier, the first 3 modules that she just described are intended to be viewed asynchronously by individuals. Modules 4, 5, and 6, however, are designed for synchronous, collaborative, collaborative learning by administrative teams. Using an intentional standards deconstruction process, Module 4 provides reflective questions that promote district calibration and personalization of the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool. While this module, Module 4, focuses solely on Standard 6, it is highly recommended that districts and schools utilize the process to facilitate additional learning sessions that promote consensus, understanding of standards, as well as district and school implementation expectations. Module 4 models annotation strategies for deconstructing meaning. For example, this element showcases 5 essential actions. A principal recruits, hires, supports, develops, and retains. And additionally, there are 2 groups referenced in the elements: teachers and other professional staff. The teachers and other professional staff must be both effective and caring. The school leader also is expected to form the 2 identified groups into an educationally effective faculty. So the school leader has the responsibility of creating a culture of collective efficacy that embraces a team mentality instead of isolated individuals working diligently behind closed classroom doors. In thinking about the knowledge and skills needed for one to master this one element's expectation, you can see that it is pretty extensive. Just as the team mentality is highlighted in this element, a team approach is also crucial to enhance leadership practices for all school leaders in the district. Working as a team by facilitating calibrating conversations that create unity in meaning and application of standards is a pivotal method to support leadership growth and ensure school and student success. Throughout Module 4, there are intentional opportunities to pause and engage in conversation, to develop district agreements and regarding meaning and expectation. Remember that you may also access, just as Eve pointed out earlier, you may access the resources for Modules 4, 5, and 6 as well. Module 5, Alignment to the Performance Measures. In this module, it describes the alignment of the 10 PSEL standards to the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. Once enough evidence is aligned to a performance measure to inform a rating, then a final summative rating is determined. And again, throughout the module, there are questions provided to facilitate a focused and purposeful look into your own district's CEP. There are plenty of opportunities to pause and for your team to collaborate and to dig into the district certified evaluation plan and answer the questions around certified evaluation of personnel. Module 6 incorporates all of the learning basically from the previous modules. The module models a collaborative growth cycle, as seen here. And this cycle is very similar to the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle for improvement. The professional standards for educational leaders are the required standards for principal and assistant principals. Therefore, the what has already been determined for Kentucky educators. So how the leadership standards are used is in the hands of those implementing the standards. Moving beyond compliance to commitment is the lever to promote meaningful implementation of standards that results in the highest levels of principal quality. So in Module 6, you will take a closer look at how a model collaborative cycle might push on that lever. PGP development leads to observation of principal practice, and coaching leads to change and growth. You will examine the superintendent and principal roles throughout the collaborative evaluation cycle. For example, you will see how multiple sources of data are gathered, examined, and analyzed in order to determine a professional growth pathway. The principal and superintendent work together to finalize the plan. So it's important to note that all 10 standards do not have to be rated. Remember from Module 5 that there must be enough evidence to provide a rating for the 4 performance measures. Therefore, when the superintendent and principal analyzed the multiple sources of data, it was determined that the principal would focus on critical attributes from standards 7, 4, 6, and 2 in the example in Module 6. Evidence from these standards, they saw, would easily align with the measures of environment, instruction, and professionalism. While some of the same evidence might also inform the measure of planning, they decided to explore the standards 1, 9, and 10 more intently. So then, after careful consideration, the decision was made for one focus area to align with the first critical attribute from Standard 10. Once these focus areas were determined using the critical attributes in the accomplished level, the conversation shifted to discussion about timeline, professional learning, and other kinds of meaningful support for the principal. After the site visit, the superintendent focused the feedback conversation using a coaching protocol. So the protocol is designed to empower the principal to determine the next steps and create an action plan to address the most critical focus area. The sample feedback and coaching protocol with question stems included in Module 6 are also included in the Module 6 resources. So as stated earlier, Module 6 is the culmination of the 5 previous modules. If you are a principal supervisor who will lead principals through the collaborative modules, you might consider viewing Module 6 first before leading Modules 4 and 5 in order to have a big picture view. So in a moment, Kevin Stoll is with us to share how he's thinking about how he might use some of these resources to develop a professional learning experience for district and school administrators. Kevin?
Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts that we have here, and also want to make sure that I say a huge shout out to those of you who've put this together. For superintendents, as you start to dig into this, you're going to discover that the Kentucky PCEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool is a tremendous tool. And I know sometimes we're frustrated by the word guidance, but in this case, guidance is a great piece because your own individual certified evaluation plan is going to be built around what's necessary for you. And so this guidance fits. It allows you to move things around the way you would like to in order to get accomplished what you would like to get accomplished. Jenny's last comment was a great one, and it's one that I would echo. As you prepare to think about how you're going to do this through the coming year, Module 6 is a great place to start. It's where I started in prepping for our work here, and I went through Module 6, went through it just like you would if you were doing a learning on your own, and took advantage of the gap times or the pause times that are built in to think about how I would utilize those periods of time working with my team. It gave me a good overview of what I need to be thinking about through the entire year. And then we started the process. So a few weeks ago, I asked my leadership team, consisting of my principals and my central office staff, to work their way through modules 1, 2, and 3. And I am asking my central office staff to be a part of this because I believe the intent in the future is for PCEL to be the standards that we would utilize with our own central office staff. So this is a great opportunity for them to begin digging into what the standards are, and then supporting me as I'm working with principals throughout the year. They'll spend time in buildings and they'll be able to have the same language conversation with principals that I would. So if you haven't thought about that, it may be something that you would consider. Again, the great thing here is that context to context is what matters. And so something that I say today is by no means something you should do. It's just an idea that's working for us. So our team went through modules 1, 2, and 3, and then we came together for working collaboratively through Module 4. And as we were going through and using it as an opportunity to break down PCEL and do an analysis on Standard 6, what we learned through the process was a great conversation about where we are as a district. We spent a huge amount of time talking about what effective meant for us and what caring meant for us. And even though we were breaking down the standards, we were doing a tremendous amount of growth within our district. Now, recognizing that I'm a new superintendent, those of you who are veterans would probably be in a spot where you can already have some things in place and already understand that. But if you don't, it created a great conversation. So we were actually doing two things. We were learning about the standards, but we were also starting to build some deep understanding about our own district and what we would be doing with it. And we'll use that similar process on all of the standards throughout the year. So my intention is to, at each principal meeting, or at least monthly within principal meetings, to go back and be reviewing one of the standards with the understanding we will have accomplished reviewing all 10 of the standards by the time we finish the year. Now, I may not take them in order, and I'm sure that many of you won't. You may have a focus for a particular standard that you want to get up front with your team. Perhaps it would be standard 3 around equity and quality, cultural responsiveness based on the timing that we're in today, or it could be standard 4 about curriculum instruction and assessment and how you're going to make sure that that happens in the world of distance learning that many of us will be dealing with. But whatever that happens to be, you'll be able to organize your thoughts and build an actual learning experience for your team that will give you the ability to dig deeper into where you are as a district and how you're going to grow your principals throughout the year and then throughout the future. We dug deeply into looking at what accomplished meant, and we understand that that's the place we want to hit. And I feel like I can say this and be very, very honest about it. If every one of my principals became accomplished principals, we would be knocking it out of the ballpark. So it's a high standard, and it's a tough standard for us to think about from the standpoint of all of us want to be that exemplary individual, whatever position we're in. But our focus is going to be around accomplished, and when we have those people who visit exemplary, that will be great for us as a district and for our students and for our staff. So that's just a quick thought, Jenny and Eve, about how we're going to look at it. And it will probably continue to evolve as we move through the year. But what you've put together here gives me the ability to start out quickly with a clear understanding of what the end is. So we're beginning with the end in mind and working our way through.
Thanks so much, Kevin. So what we have done today is we have provided an overview of the professional standards for educational leaders. Our office certainly wishes to support the implementation of these in school districts. And as you do, on the side we have our three email addresses. Feel free to contact us because Kevin worked with us as a part of the committee and as one of the superintendents that reviewed the standards and the modules. So please let us know what needs you have. We're here to support. And we simply want to emphasize once more, this is a guidance document. It is optional. It is not mandated. None of the modules are mandated, but they're there to simply support you as you go forward this year in the implementation of the professional standards for the evaluation of principals and assistant principals. Jenny or Kevin, do you have anything to say at the end?
No, just thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing your insights. And we look forward to learning together soon.
So this would have been the point where we asked for, if we were face-to-face, where we would have taken questions and comments, but feel free to simply contact any of us if you need any additional guidance or if you have questions. Thank you.